This is a seismic shockwave radiating from the muddy trenches of Donetsk to the high-level boardrooms of Washington, Brussels, and London. On paper, Moscow has declared a decisive victory, asserting that Pokrovsk was completely secured as of December 1. Yet, beneath that proclamation lies the grim reality of an unconquered fortress, a cityscape defined by trenches of death, where wave after wave of Russian mechanized assaults are being pulverized, leaving behind mounds of casualties. According to an official communiqué issued on December 1, the Kremlin claimed to have finalized the capture of Pokrovsk, a calculated propaganda maneuver designed to construct a position of strength ahead of potential negotiations with the United States. However, more than a week post-declaration, high-intensity kinetic engagements continue to ravage the city. Ukraine is defending Pokrovsk with a ferocity unrivaled on any other front of Vladimir Putin's Donetsk campaign, transforming the sector into hell on earth for the invading forces. Here, anti-tank ditches have evolved into veritable mass graves that swallow successive waves of Russian infantry and armor. On December 10, the true operational picture of Pokrovsk crystallized in a mechanized engagement that Euromaidan press characterized as a microcosm of the broader battle. That day, Russian forces launched a coordinated armored thrust against Ukrainian defensive lines, operating under the assumption of tactical advantage. The climatic conditions, heavy fog, pervasive dampness, and deep mud led the Russian command to calculate that their armored columns would be obscured from the lethal gaze of Ukrainian FPV drones. The fog restricted drone visibility, and the viscous mud hampered infantry maneuverability. In Moscow's calculus, these were optimal conditions for a surprise breakthrough, utilizing armored personnel carriers, logistical trucks, and even combat motorcycles. To a degree, the assessment regarding the weather was technically sound. However, Ukraine demonstrated that a mere meteorological advantage was insufficient to shift the tactical tide. In a detailed after-action report on Telegram, the Ukrainian 7th Air Assault Corps, one of the primary units holding the line on December 10, outlined the sequence of events. According to their account, Russia massed a mechanized formation comprising armor, light vehicles, and motorcycles, attempting a pincer movement from the south to breach northern Pokrovsk. Crucially, this was not the surprise offensive Moscow had engineered. The 7th Corps had identified the telltale signatures of an imminent assault, and Ukrainian reserve elements were pre-positioned to intercept. The 68th Jaeger Brigade, named after Oleksandr Dovbush, engaged and destroyed the lead Russian box, military slang for the vanguard armored vehicle. Instantaneously, adjacent units, backed by artillery batteries, unleashed a synchronized barrage on the exposed infantry and equipment. The Russian mechanized thrust disintegrated before it could inflict structural damage on the Pokrovsk defensive perimeter. According to the 7th Corps, the subsequent phase of the battle was merely a mopping-up operation to hunt down the stragglers and vehicles that survived the initial kill zone. Euromaidan press noted that Ukraine's primary success lay in dismantling the Russian assumption of a weather shield. As soon as the first Russian armor emerged from the mist, FPV drone operators from the Jaeger Brigade achieved a direct catastrophic hit. With the spearhead blunted, the remaining Ukrainian fires, ranging from small arms to heavy artillery, were unleashed upon the stalled column. Any marginal territorial gains Russia might have secured that day were rapidly reversed, as the entire assault formation was annihilated. Ukrinform cited Ruslan Muzychuk, spokesman for the National Guard of Ukraine, who provided the environmental context. Dense fog persisted from early morning through much of the day. He confirmed that the enemy attempted to leverage this visibility cloak for a mechanized blitz on Pokrovsk. The fact that these assets were detected and neutralized under such adverse conditions represents a significant tactical triumph for the defense. Muzychuk categorically rejected the narrative of Pokrovsk's fall, affirming that Ukraine maintains active offensive operations in 15 settlements surrounding the city while holding the interior defensive lines. December 10 alone witnessed 234 combat clashes, With 49 concentrated in the Pokrovsk sector, the major Russian push was broken, and the city remained standing, defying Moscow's premature victory lap. More critically, this was not an isolated skirmish. Intelligence from Pokrovsk indicates that the destruction on December 10 is part of a recurring pattern of attrition. Ukraine has transformed the anti-tank ditches and approaches into pre-sighted kill zones sectors, where assault waves are systematically crushed and trenches are filled with the fallen. Euromaidan press describes the battlefield as having descended into a bloody stalemate. Russian commanders are feeding thousands of personnel into the grinder to prevent Ukrainian counterattacks, creating a scenario where wave after wave turns the grey zone into a death trap, forcing Russian soldiers to physically step over the bodies of their comrades to advance a single meter. The genesis of this tragedy traces back to the failed breakthrough attempt toward Dobropilya, just miles north of Pokrovsk. The salient Russia carved out in the direction of Dobropilya appeared on the verge of success in early November. At that juncture, defense analyst David Axe assessed that the battle for Pokrovsk and the defense of the Dobropilya salient were nearing a breaking point, noting that Kyiv's reserves were dangerously stretched, with too many units pinned down at Dobropilya to reinforce Pokrovsk effectively. At the time, all indicators supported that pessimistic forecast, but the reality on the ground diverged. The Dobropilya salient failed to yield a decisive operational victory, and Pokrovsk's defenders remained combat effective a month later. According to Euromaidan press, Russian objectives have shifted from seeking a breakthrough to holding the northern flank at any cost. That cost is the same currency the Kremlin has spent since the invasion began: human lives. The Russian command continues to feed the front with hundreds of fresh recruits daily, hoping to utilize a sea of people to saturate the defenses around Dobropilya and Pokrovsk, thereby restoring the salient and reopening the possibility of an encirclement. Ukraine has held firm against this strategy of throwing bodies at the problem, preventing the encirclement of units within the city. This has forced Putin to pay an exorbitant premium for a campaign that has already consumed vast resources. According to The Independent, President Volodymyr Zelensky estimates that Russia has concentrated approximately 170,000 troops on the Pokrovsk axis, out of a total in-country force of 700,000. In certain sectors around the city, the force disparity reaches a staggering 8-to-1 ratio in Russia's favor. Yet, this numerical asymmetry has not translated into tactical dominance. In another vivid illustration of the war's micro-reality, Euromaidan press analyzed footage from a Ukrainian drone in the ruins of Volodymyrivka, a village Russia claimed to have captured in August. Two Russian soldiers, traversing a village they ostensibly controlled, navigated through collapsed walls and rubble. Unbeknownst to them, a Ukrainian paratrooper lay in ambush amidst the debris. As the pair approached, the Ukrainian soldier engaged them at close range. The Russians attempted to scramble for cover behind a remnant wall, but the paratrooper, guided by real-time drone overwatch, pursued them through the ruins. Within seconds, the first soldier fell, followed by the second identified by analysts as likely being the assault group commander. Scenes like this, Euromaidan press notes, play out dozens of times: daily, rapid, lethal close-quarters combat where outnumbered Ukrainian units, leveraged by a robust drone network, dismantle Russian infiltration groups before they can coalesce. This microcosm encapsulates the macro war. Russia seeks to breach defenses with mass and area firepower, while Ukraine responds with granular, precision tactics, maximizing situational awareness. On the Pokrovsk front, reports indicate that Russian infantry now refer to the approach routes as ditches of death. Footage from the elite Birds of Magyar drone unit documents the horrific scale of attrition. In a single 200 square meter sector near an anti-tank trench, over 30 Russian bodies lay scattered. In other zones, casualty density reached 20 bodies within a 10 square meter radius. The cycle repeats ad infinitum. A small Russian assault group enters a kill zone covered by FPV drones and is decimated. Ukraine maintains surveillance, knowing the enemy will simply send the next wave. One video depicts a trench filled with corpses, burnt motorcycles, and debris, yet Russian soldiers continue to scramble over the pile. A wounded soldier is seen crawling over his comrades to escape, only for the camera to switch to the point of view of an inbound FPV drone. The subsequent strike flings him back onto the mound of the dead. Viewed from Washington or Brussels, these images validate the efficacy of Ukraine's active defense, but simultaneously raise questions about the sustainability of Moscow's human conveyor belt. For European capitals like Berlin and Paris, where energy subsidies, defense budgets, and aid packages are debated to the last euro, the story of Pokrovsk forces a confrontation with a grim question: who will continue to underwrite the cost of Europe's security architecture? For Asian allies like Tokyo or Seoul, this serves as a case study in how a protracted war of attrition shapes the competitive landscape between the US and revisionist powers like Russia and China. Meanwhile, inside Pokrovsk, the dynamic is not purely defensive. On December 11, United 2-4 media reported that assault troopers from the Skala battalion raised the Ukrainian flag in the very center of the city. Footage released by the 7th Air Assault Corps bore the caption, "Stormtroopers of the Skala battalion have raised the Ukrainian flag in the center of Pokrovsk. Despite the Kremlin's fabrications, Ukraine fights, will continue to fight, and cedes no ground." With a single video, the narrative that Pokrovsk had fallen evaporated. Clearly, Ukraine retains the capacity for counterattacks in the city center. However, the strategic picture remains a bloody stalemate. If this attrition rate persists, the Russian death toll around Pokrovsk will continue to climb. Each failed assault compels Russian commanders to strip troops from occupied rear areas to plug the gaps, thereby weakening their hold on those very territories. This is Ukraine's operational opportunity. The network of kill zones around Pokrovsk may eventually exhaust Russia's offensive potential to the point where Ukraine can not only hold the city, but retake surrounding settlements. Conversely, Putin appears to lack a plan B as the Pokrovsk campaign derails. The Kremlin's only recourse is to accelerate the meat grinder. The human cost is staggering. The Moscow Times cited a pro-Russian military telegram channel, SHOT, claiming Ukraine had lost over 500 soldiers in Pokrovsk by November. While the source is biased, if this is the worst figure propaganda can fabricate, it inadvertently highlights the catastrophic scale of Russian losses, which are exponentially higher. The Moscow Times reported that in October alone, Ukraine neutralized approximately 25,000 Russian personnel, the majority on the Pokrovsk axis, the UK Foreign Office, via a statement by Neil Holland on November 12, added that Russia sacrificed nearly 100,000 troops to advance a mere 15 kilometers toward Pokrovsk over the course of a year. In this context, an 8-to-1 manpower advantage becomes meaningless if every Ukrainian defender exacts a toll of 10 attackers. Euromaidan Press concludes that Russia's strategy is defined by a single variable, volume. As long as the manpower conveyor belt functions, the Pokrovsk front will remain metastable. But with losses described as unprecedented, the durability of this tempo is suspect. It is conceivable that Pokrovsk may eventually fall. Some projections push this to 2026. But if a city is purchased with tens of thousands of lives, the subsequent campaign to penetrate the Donetsk fortress belt is strategically doomed. Pokrovsk stands. Russian infantry are dying at record rates due to Ukraine's high lethality defense. The morale crisis is palpable. Reports suggest the Russian ranks are rife with self-inflicted injuries and refusal of orders to avoid deployment to the ditches of death. For the global community, the question remains: in a conflict where one side weaponizes its own population and the other relies on precision and will, who ultimately pays the bill from the blood-soaked fields of Donetsk to the energy markets and tax receipts of the West? What are your thoughts on this human conveyor belt strategy, and where does it lead the international order? Share your analysis in the comments.